issue that comes up is, as we're using ELDs, nothing has changed in the hourly service groups. They're still the same as they've always been, especially for your group. Now they've changed a little bit for property carriers, but generally yours have stayed the same for decades and they aren't changing now. So everything you were putting down on paper in a paper logbook is still the same information that you have to record. It's just being done electronically. So it's just a way that you have to figure out and how to learn to use the devices, use the system, to record the same information that you've always been recording. That's the biggest point that I think we can make across the board. The other thing that's changing though with ELDs is they are very precise and you have to be more accurate. You can't have, I know you wouldn't do it, but you can't have 2 or 3 logbooks. You can't do a lot of erasing, all these kind of things. So suddenly people are wanting to know what the rules are. All these years, and we're not talking about you, of course, but all these years they didn't worry about it too much. And now that they realize there's going to be possibly a device recording the activities, they know they're going to need to get a bit more precise. So those are probably the biggest things that are changing. This afternoon session is billed as technical. Danielle, you want to talk to them just a little bit about what's going on this afternoon? I can give you this mic here.
If I might, too, just if it's okay with you, Daniel, just let everybody know. As questions come up, Brad Tucker on ABA staff and myself, we have microphones up here too. If you want to just give us a hand up, we're happy to welcome the microphone so that everybody can ask a question.
Right, as Tom said, this session we wanted to kind of concentrate on the hours of service because, as he said, when we're out doing these ELD sessions, we've learned that folks really didn't understand the hours of service rules to begin with, but they've always made it, look good, or get by on the paper. So that's why we wanted to kind of do this, is keep the two separate. This one afternoon, as Suzanne said, is basically a briefer repeat of the town hall session that we had. And that town hall session specifically talks about the Appendix A, Subpart B, which is the technical specifications in the ELD rule. Now that was geared more towards manufacturers, providers of software systems, because they had a lot of questions on how they were going to meet some of these specifications. Now it would behoove you guys to also, as an operator, attend that so that you understand how it works. Because as you know, we'll talk about the self-certification. We took the NHTSA approach to where those manufacturers are self-certifying. So when you do your shopping, there's questions that you're going to want to ask. Well, how you can get the system to go and accommodate your operation and your type business. So with that said, this afternoon is going to be that technical specification where we'll talk a lot about how that ELD is going to work. So what we're gearing towards now is hours of service. Like he said, the ELD rule did not change the hours of service regulations, it only changed how we record it. So this is going to go back now so that when you have all your questions about, well, how should we record this and how should we record that? Basically, this is going to be going towards the hours of service. And then this afternoon, we're really going to key in on those ELD specifications.
Okay. Thank you, Danielle. We are going to take questions as we go along. We were originally planning to hold until the end, and that works in some sessions. But here I'll stop at certain points along the way and see if you have questions. If it's really something you just can't wait, holler as we go along. But I'll stop periodically and we'll go with that. One other thing about the ELDs, though, one thing I've found in my discussions with people is they don't have a big picture concept of what's going on with the ELD and the record, the driver's record. All that's happening, and I'd say all, there's a lot to it, is what was your paper logbook that that driver picked up and carried around with him or her. Now it's going to be, if you're into computers, it's going to be more or less in the cloud. Because what happens is people suddenly don't realize how the system's going to work if this driver switches vehicles, because they've been thinking that the information's in the device, but it's not. And they'll be getting into that this afternoon. So it's a question of where is that record? But there is a driver's record of duty status, so it has to be there for the prior 7 days. And there are methods to use the devices, and they'll get into that this afternoon, how to cover the way it works. But it seemed like, in talking to people, they were thinking of a device on a vehicle that recorded things, and you had to have that device with you, that sort of information. So hopefully that will be clarified by the time you get through this afternoon. We will take questions, I say, off and on. If you have a real, what we used to call stump the instructor, even though this is not an instruction course, there's always a student in the group that has a really complicated situation that they want to get resolved today. We'll pass you off to the experts, to Loretta and Danielle, and you can catch them during the break. And I think Pete Chandler's here also somewhere. And they can get into that kind of a scenario with you, but it doesn't apply to most people in the room. Now, I suspect I usually measure the amount of gray hair, white hair in the room, or no hair. And I suspect this group is pretty well experienced in the motor coach bus area, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on some fundamentals. I, in particular, am not going to get into it, for example, where we have to start from scratch with all the differences with school buses and transit agencies that give to FTA grants and church buses and all the different prison buses, you name it. When we do an overall presentation on our service, it takes a day or two if you really want to get into depth, with the group. So we're going to skip that. Assume you know where you belong in the big picture. If you have questions about that and doubts about it, though, see the folks during the breaks and later. We just don't have time today to get into too much in that area. Now, there is information available on the passenger carrier driver's hours of service. Temporarily, this is a booklet brochure, but temporarily it's not on our website. Normally you can just download it from our website, and it's very good, especially for newer drivers, for people that are wanting the overview of the hours of service for passenger carrier. Now, we'll have to modify this a little bit as we get into ELDs, but the fundamentals are still there. We took it down to revise it to correct some things in it due to ELDs. It'll be going back up with the same look and feel. So at some point you'll be able to download this from our website, and it'll have a lot of the information that you can use to pass on, especially to new people. Now, the one thing I think we most likely don't have to go through, but I'll put it up here anyhow, is what the basic hours of service rules are for passenger carriers. Unlike the property carriers, as I mentioned, yours haven't changed in ages. And sometimes I put a chart up there that shows all the changes since the 1930s in other parts of the motor carrier area, but yours haven't. So you still have the same basic rules, and the ELD is going to be recording these things. The first one, of course, is you have a 10-hour driving limit. Now, when you're calculating hours of service, you always have to start somewhere. You can't start in the middle of things. So we start anytime you've had at least 8 hours off duty. That's our beginning point to start talking about what the limits are. So after that 8 hours off duty, you can drive up to 10 hours. Now, one of the big discussions I'll get into in ELDs is what is driving. I think everybody knows the vehicle's moving, you're driving. Technically, the rule says if your hands are on the wheel, you're driving. So we'll get into that just a little bit here in a while. I am going to try to elaborate a little bit on some of those points that weren't a big deal in the past, but I'll be talking about driving because that's one of the things that is automatically recorded in certain ways with the ELD. Now, the passenger carriers have the 15-hour on-duty limit after that 8 hours off duty. You have what I'll call a big advantage, that those 15 hours don't have to be consecutive. If you were over in the property carrying side, they have a 14-hour rule, but there's no relation to their 14 and your 15 because theirs are consecutive hours. If they go on, start work at 7 in the morning, they have to stop driving by 9 at night. And it doesn't matter if they had off duty in between. For the passenger carriers, as you know, the on-duty time doesn't have to be consecutive. It's accumulated as you go along. So off-duty time is subtracted as you go through the day. It's like the clock starts running. A lot of times in the longer presentations, we have some clocks running. The on-duty clock runs. It can stop. It can run for a while if you go off-duty. So we will be talking about what's on-duty and off-duty, because that still is something that the driver and carrier have to make that decision. No device can make that decision for you. The 60, 70 hour on-duty limit is taking those 15 hours of on-duty and spreading them out over the course of a week. You're either, depending on how you set it up in your company, you're either under 60 hours and 7 days or 78 days of on-duty time. You can be working, of course, beyond those hours. You just can't be driving until you have the time off again to reset that cumulative time. I think you all know how to do the old recap concept and figuring out the 60, 70. That still, of course, is there. That takes quite a while to explain, so we're not even going to talk about it because I'm pretty sure you all know about that. Sleeper berths are becoming talked about a lot more in the passenger carrier area. They started in a certain segment of the industry, as you know, but we're starting here, and again, I'm not as involved in passenger carriers, of course, as Loretta and others are, but we're starting to hear things more and more, excuse me, about sleeper berths on various types of motor coaches. And as you know, a sleeper berth can be there. It has to meet technical specifications that are in Part 393 of the rules. And there's a lot of ways. We have a particular office in our headquarters where they'll help make a determination as to whether a sleeper berth is legitimate or not. If you want to count it as a sleeper berth, now you can have anything you want, to be in there, but it's not going to be counted as sleeper berth time unless it meets the official specifications for a sleeper berth. Your sleeper berth time is just simply taking the 8 hours off duty. You can split it into 2 portions, neither of which is less than 2 hours long. And you have a simple one compared to property carriers. Theirs has become, over the years, very complicated. And that's one of the biggest problems in understanding on their part. Now, no matter how you look at it, with the ELDs or on paper, there are only 4 duty statuses. There's some other special exceptions. There's some additional information in the ELD world, but no matter how you look at it, it all comes back to the 4 lines on the logbook. You're either going to be off duty, and we'll talk about that. You're going to be in an official sleeper berth, and beyond that line. You're going to be driving, and again, we'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll talk more about it this afternoon in that session. Or you're going to be on duty, not driving. And what we should put as a caveat there, or a parenthetical after that, is on duty, not driving a CMV, a commercial motor vehicle of any type. You could be driving some other type of vehicle and still be on duty, not driving. So we'll go back over these and look at some scenarios that come up. There's unlimited numbers of situations that people are bringing up. They kind of drive us crazy. One of the problems is that it's quite true, it sometimes depends on who you ask, and even in our organization, because they are borderline questions. And if you take that borderline question and ask a lot of different people, you're going to get slightly different answers. So we're going to talk in a moment about regulatory guidance, which is kind of an official answer. And then we have some lesser categories. I think, I don't know what the bottom category B is, maybe if you ask us in the hallway, that counts as our personal opinion at the moment, unless we can point to somewhere in the place where it's written down. So we're going to take a look at some of these. Now, looking at the different duty statuses, off-duty, surprisingly, is not actually defined in the regulations. So the simplest way to put it is it's the opposite of on-duty. No matter what subcategory you're in, you're either on-duty or off-duty, because even driving is a category of on-duty, and sleeper berth is a category of off-duty. So there's really, when you break it down, only two things. You're either on-duty or not. So in terms of definitions, for the sake of that, off-duty is simply the opposite of on-duty. And sleeper berth is a form of off-duty. That question comes up every once in a while. And as I said, you have to meet the specifications for a sleeper berth. And it does give you the advantage of just having a place to rest, if nothing else. If you're a co-driver, you might be able to split your time into the two periods and still get credit for the 8 hours of sleeper berth. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. I know I'm saying that a lot, but it's true.